Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Kuru and I'm a GP and I'm a member of the 5-2 Medics team. Today we want to talk to you just a little bit about death. The topic alone brings up a lot of emotions. It's a controversial topic at times and definitely not one that I think we speak about often enough in our communities. I once asked a family member about a will and whether they had one in place, and I was told, you don't ever speak to an Igbo man about death. Well, we're here to challenge you about that and actually encourage you to have those difficult conversations with all the information that you might need. From a clinical aspect, we talk about death when your heart stops pumping on its own, or when your lungs stop breathing on their own and you die a natural death. And this can happen in a variety of situations. In the press recently, there's been a lot of bad press and negative press, I should say, about DNRs or DNARs, and they are do not resuscitate or do not attempt to resuscitate orders. And they're a clinical tool that we use to decide that actually when someone's heart stops or when someone stops breathing, what do we do next? Do we try resuscitation, which is a process where we pump on the chest, sometimes to a depth of around 5 or 6 centimeters. We can bruise or damage the ribs in an attempt to get the heart pumping and the lungs going again. It's not like anything in the movies. If resuscitation is successful, and it's only successful in maybe around 8 to 10% of cases, you're not going to just suddenly wake up. We have to think about next steps and whether you need to go to something called intensive care, where you might need support with your breathing, which is tubes down your throat, and that's a process called ventilation. And then we have to think about, if you're going to go through ventilation, are you going to be well enough to come out of it? Because you need to have the muscle power and the strength and the health to be able to come through on the other side. And some people do make it through. But having these discussions can be very difficult, and it can be very challenging sometimes when we're having these discussions right at the end of life. It can seem that you're not treating your patients when you say you're actually not going to be resuscitating them. But I want to encourage you to have these discussions with your family members. What would you want? If it comes to your time and you come to the end of your life, would you expect to be resuscitated, or would you even want it? If your doctor has thought that you need a DNR in place and they think that resuscitation wouldn't be helpful, have you discussed with them why is this the case? In some cases, it's a fair decision to challenge, but we do take into consideration your frailty, your health condition, and how successful it might be. Sometimes people also think that if you've got a DNR in place, that actually you're not going to treat them at all, that if you had a chest infection or you stubbed your toe, that we wouldn't actually implement care. And this isn't and shouldn't be the case. This is where something called advanced care planning comes into place. It's what you do in kind of all of the situations that might possibly happen that we could possibly think about. How would we care for you? For some people, it is the case that if they were really unwell, they wouldn't want to go into hospital and we'd care for them at home. For others, it would be, if I get a urine infection, I'd want everything to be done for me, and I actually might want to go to hospital if that was appropriate for me. And this is where we have to have the discussions about what we would want and what we would also expect if those situations come along. But what we want you to do today is actually, while you're fit and well and you're able to have these discussions with your family, let's start talking about it. What would you expect? It's so much easier when we know what people think, even if we don't always agree on the outcomes. Talk to your family members about what you would expect. If your heart stops pumping and if your lungs stop breathing, what do you think the next steps would be for you clinically?